And I know this, we are all connected. We're in it together. Let's take a moment to get a historical perspective on the current situation as well. Let's look at some of the major demographic events in the past 500 years. Let's remember that the arrival of Europeans to North America started a horrific pandemic. It was worse than the plague of in Europe and thousands of times worse than AIDS. Native Americans had no resistance to European diseases like smallpox. Entire populations were wiped out. The reason it was so easy for Europeans to move west across North America was because the Indian population had largely died off from disease. When Europeans moved west across the continent, the Native American population was a tiny fraction of what it had been in 1491. Another major demographic move, of course, was the importation of African slaves. Slavery became the basis of an economy producing cotton and tobacco for an international market. The legacy of slavery, racism, and oppression still casts its shadow across America. 170 years ago, the slave-based economy of huge plantations growing commodities for export continued to expand westward across the South. But then it hit a border. What is now southeast Texas is prime land for growing cotton. The trouble was, it was part of Mexico. The border was porous, though, and undocumented Anglos poured across, bringing their black slaves. But there was another problem. Slavery was illegal in Mexico. So the Anglo immigrants soon fomented a rebellion that was aimed at making slavery legal. This is not radical left-wing historiography, by the way. It's the standard account of academic historians. The fact that the white Texan revolt against Mexico was founded on the desire to extend black slavery somehow never filtered down to what we teach in elementary schools. It was not taught in my elementary school classes in San Antonio. But of course, twisting history has a long history in Texas schools. After winning their quick little war of Texas independence, the Texans joined the Union a few years later as a slave state. Sadly, Sam Bowie, Davy Crockett, and Sam Houston were not the freedom-loving heroes that I have been taught to believe. We need to see our present situation in this context. The border we now have between the United States and Mexico was essentially created to make space for slavery. The fences and the guard towers we are building along that border are trying to keep Mexicans from re-entering land that was taken from them. And of course, the Mexican elite, mostly of European descent, were not exactly blameless. The land undocumented Americans stole from them was land that they had previously stolen from Native Americans. So I ask you today, who has a moral right to be here? Right here in Phoenix, or in Denver, or in San Antonio. It's easy to determine who has a legal right to be there, but what about a moral right? Why is it all right for a wealthy family from New York to retire to Arizona, but not all right for a poor family from Chiapas to come here seeking work? And here I have to speak about the issue of some people being legal and others being illegal. As a religious people who affirm human compassion and who advocate for human rights and who seek justice, we must never make the mistake of confusing a legal right with a moral right. The forced removal of Native Americans from their land onto reservations was legal. Later on in my lifetime, we had laws in the South designed to prevent African Americans from voting. Apartheid in South Africa was legal. The confiscation of property from the Jews at the beginning of the Nazi regime was legal. The Spanish Inquisition was legal. Crucifying Jesus was legal. burning Michael Servetus at the stake for his Unitarian theology. Legal. The fact that something is legal does not cut any moral ice. The powerful have always used the legal system to oppress the powerless. As citizens, yes, we should have respect for law, but more importantly, our duty is to create laws that are founded on our high sense of justice, equity, and compassion. And as Unitarian Universalists, we have a long and proud tradition of opposing unjust laws. One of our martyrs, the Reverend James Reed, died while protesting Jim Crow laws in Alabama. We have before us some fundamental choices. There are loud voices that urge us to choose fear, denial, reactionary nationalism, and racism. And we must resist, because that path leads to division, hatred, violence, and death. There is a better way. It's the way that is urged upon us by our own UU principles and by every major religious tradition. It's the path of compassion, hope, and human dignity. We must choose a path that is founded on the recognition that we are all connected, that we are all in this together. We don't need fences. The last thing we need today is more barriers to divide us. We need bridges. We need understanding and cooperation. What might we do if we were guided by our highest aspirations? What do you think we would do if we were guided by these same values as expressed in our Unitarian Universalist principles? If we allowed ourselves to be guided by our sense of the inherent worth and dignity of every person? What kind of future might we build if we created policies that were guided by notions of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations?